Boxing has always been a dangerous game, but lately deaths in the ring are hitting harder than ever. Fighters like Maxim Dadashev, Hugo Santillan, and now Patrick Day, all gone in less than 5 months, taken by injuries they suffered in the ring. These tragedies aren't new, but nowadays, with massive paydays and the dream of carving their name into history, fighters are stepping into the ring even when their health is on the line or doctors are waving red flags. In this piece, we're diving into the most recent and shocking cases of fighters losing their lives to injuries sustained in battle. Patrick Day versus Charles Conwell. In the super welterweight division, 27-year-old Patrick Day stepped into the ring on the night of October 12th in Chicago as part of the undercard for Ukrainian heavyweight star Alexander Usyk. The bout against Charles Conwell wasn't just another fight. It had a USBA regional title on the line, but no one could have foreseen the heartbreaking turn of events that would unfold. Early on, Day hit the canvas twice, with Conwell gaining the upper hand. Then came the dramatic 10th round. Conwell delivered a devastating knockout blow that left Day unconscious. Paramedics rushed him off the ring on a stretcher, and he was quickly taken to the hospital. Tragically, Day slipped into a coma, and despite an emergency brain surgery, he couldn't pull through. The boxing world was left in shock, mourning the loss of a talented fighter. Maxim Dadashev versus Subriel Matias. Russian boxer Maxim Dadashev faced Puerto Rican Subriel Matias in an IBF eliminator fight in the US back in July. It was a grueling bout, but Dadashev took too much punishment in the 11th round, forcing his corner to throw in the towel. It marked the first loss of his career. Tragically, on the way back to the locker room, the 28-year-old fighter collapsed and was rushed to the hospital with signs of a brain bleed. Doctors performed emergency brain surgery and placed him in a medically induced coma, but they couldn't save his life. Later, Dadashev's widow Elizaveta opened up about the heartbreaking moment, saying, "The doctor told me he's going to die now. They gave me a chair and I watched him take his last breath." She didn't hold back in blaming the referee for the tragedy. The ref never even checked on Max, despite the number of shots he took. He didn't call the ringside doctor to examine him. That negligence and lack of professionalism cost my husband his life. Even Matias, visibly shaken by the outcome, refused to accept his $75,000 fight purse, showing his respect and sorrow for what happened. Christian Daghio versus Don Parueang. Back in November 2018, 49-year-old Christian Daghio, who just couldn't walk away from boxing, tragically passed away due to head injuries sustained in a fight for the Asian Silver Championship against Thai fighter Don Parueang. By the 12th round, the Italian boxer was ahead on the judges' scorecards. But after taking a brutal combo to the head, he hit the canvas in a knockdown, and moments later, a knockout sealed his fate. The ref immediately called for medical assistance, but Christian had already lost consciousness. On the way to the hospital, he slipped into a coma, spent a few days in intensive care, and sadly passed away without regaining consciousness. Daghio's brother later shared that Christian went out the way he always dreamed, even though he aimed to fight until he was 80. The boxing ring was his life, and he died a champion. Eduardo Abreu versus Hugo Santillan. One of the most recent tragedies in boxing, caused by the fighter himself, took place in July 2019. The 23-year-old Argentine Hugo Santillan faced off against Uruguay's top fighter Eduardo Abreu in a 10-round bout for the WBC Latino silver title. The fight ended in a draw with Hugo's face battered and bloodied. While waiting for the referee's decision, Hugo collapsed in the ring. Doctors discovered a blood clot in his brain, performed surgery, but after 2 heart and respiratory failures, Hugo tragically passed away. It turned out that Santillan had stepped into the ring despite a medical order, forbidding him from fighting for 45 days. That suspension started after his previous grueling 10-round match against Germany's Artem Harutyunyan on June 15th, where he took an excessive amount of punishment. In fact, the German Boxing Federation had temporarily revoked his license and banned him from competing in Europe to safeguard his health. But Hugo ignored the warnings and fought in the Americas anyway. Mike Towell versus Dale Evans. On September 29, 2016 in Glasgow, undefeated Scottish boxer Mike Towell faced Dale Evans in what became his 13th and final fight. The bout took a devastating turn when Towell hit the canvas in the first round, suffering a knockdown. By the 5th round, after a brutal left hook from Evans, Towell was visibly struggling to breathe, forcing the referee to call off the fight. The Iron Mike didn't walk out of the ring that night. He was carried out on a stretcher and rushed to the hospital. There, doctors placed him on a ventilator, but a brain bleed caused severe swelling. Despite being taken off life support, Towell fought on for another 12 hours before passing away, leaving the boxing world in shock. In the UK, the tragedy was partly blamed on the decision to continue the fight after Towell's first knockdown. Neither he nor his corner seemed to fully grasp the extent of the damage he had sustained early in the bout, and pushing forward only worsened the situation. Adding to the heartbreak, Towell's wife revealed he had been complaining about headaches in the weeks leading up to the fight. She poignantly stated, "Our child lost his father, but he'll always be proud of what his dad achieved." Scott Westgarth vs. Dex Spellman. February 2018 marked the tragic end of 31-year-old British light heavyweight Scott Westgarth's journey. His story stands out because he entered boxing late at 24, but climbed the ranks surprisingly fast. In a dramatic fight, he hit the canvas against Dex Spellman but managed to rally and secure a victory via judge's decision. However, shortly after the bout, Scott collapsed unconscious and was rushed to the hospital with a suspected brain bleed. Sadly, he passed away the next day without regaining consciousness. Yet Scott's death gave life to 7 others. According to his mother, he had quietly registered as an organ donor, and after his passing, his organs were transplanted to save 7 lives. "He was helping people right to the very end," she shared. "Scott was kind, happy, courageous. I want people to remember him not just as a boxer, but as a remarkable human being." Francisco Ruiz versus Ricardo Cortez. Back in November 2017, 24-year-old Salvadoran prospect Francisco Ruiz stepped into the ring for just his 4th professional bout, taking on fellow countryman Ricardo Cortez. It was a major milestone for Ruiz, his first 8-round fight. Tragically, it also became his last. The young fighter lost his life after a brutal knockout during the match. In the 8th round, Ruiz, who had only turned pro 6 months prior, took a devastating punch that sent him crashing to the canvas, hitting his head hard. He underwent an emergency brain surgery but never regained consciousness. After a few days in a coma, his family made the heartbreaking decision to take him off life support. Outside the ring, Francisco wasn't just a boxer. He also ran a motorcycle repair shop, juggling his love for the sport with his passion for bikes. Kim Duk-Koo versus Ray Mancini. Back in 1982, before recent tragedies shook the boxing world, one of the most shocking moments was the death of 23-year-old South Korean fighter Kim Duk-Koo. Just days before stepping into the ring for a 15-round championship bout in Las Vegas against WBA lightweight champ Ray Mancini, Kim wrote a haunting message on the mirror of his hotel room: "Live or die." It was almost as if he foresaw what was about to happen. In the 14th round of the fight, Kim took a brutal punch that sent him crashing to the canvas, hitting the back of his head. He tried to stand but couldn't continue, and the referee stopped the fight. In the locker room, Kim slipped into a coma. Doctors later discovered a severe subdural hematoma, but surgery couldn't save him. The aftermath was devastating. Haunted by guilt, the referee Richard Green took his own life in 1983. 4 months after losing her son, Kim's mother also ended her life. As for Mancini, he was never the same. The tragedy weighed heavily on him, and for a while he struggled to find the will to fight again. This heartbreaking event led to a major change in the sport. Boxing organizations reduced the length of championship fights from 15 rounds to 12, a decision aimed at prioritizing fighter safety. Pedro Alcazar versus Fernando Montiel. Pablo Pedro Alcazar, Panama's WBO super flyweight champion, tragically set an unusual record after his untimely death. On June 22, 2002, he stepped into the ring to defend his title against Mexican power puncher Fernando Montiel. From the opening bell, Pedro seemed off, sluggish and lacking his usual spark. As the rounds progressed, Montiel landed more and more shots, breaking through Alcazar's defense. By the 6th round, Pedro slumped against the ropes, overwhelmed. Despite the tough loss, Alcazar walked out of the ring, and even the arena, on his own feet, already planning a comeback to reclaim his title. Tragically, just a day later, everything changed. While taking a shower in his Las Vegas hotel room, Pedro suddenly collapsed. Efforts to save him proved futile. Pedro Alcazar passed away 36 hours after the fight, marking the longest recorded time in boxing history between the end of a match and a fighter suffering a fatal brain hemorrhage. At his funeral, among those who carried his coffin was none other than Roberto Duran, Panama's legendary multi-division world champion. Emil Griffith versus Benny Paret. And last on the list, the deadly showdown that shook millions and pulled boxing off TV screens for 10 years. On March 24, 1962, at the legendary Madison Square Garden, Emil Griffith and Benny Paret faced off for the third time, deciding the welterweight world champion. Cuban champ Paret, who held the title at the time, nearly ended the fight in the 6th round, but Griffith was saved by the bell. The bout went into the 12th round, where Griffith, seizing his moment, trapped Paret in the corner and unleashed nearly 30 unanswered blows. It wasn't until over a minute later that the referee finally intervened. By then, 25-year-old Paret was unconscious and was carried off the ring on a stretcher. Immediately after, they rushed the Cuban to the hospital, but he had fallen into a deep coma, from which he never recovered, despite 10 days of desperate attempts to save his life. 10 days later, his heart stopped. Thanks to television coverage, millions of people watched the tragedy unfold at Madison Square Garden. The final moments of the fight were replayed countless times, sparking public outrage, especially since children were watching. Calls to ban such violent footage from TV led to boxing being off the air in the US for the next 10 years. The referee never officiated another boxing match.